All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to the January 1st, 2024 Seismic Compliance Deadlines webinar, brought to you by the Seismic Compliance Unit here at the Department of Healthcare Access and Information. This webinar will focus on the upcoming January 1st, 2024 requirements and deadlines for AB 1882 and NPC 3, 4, 4D, and 5. The handout for this presentation will be available in the chat. You should be able to click the link and download the presentation slides for your use. We're scheduled to be here for 1 hour today, and we will not have time for questions and answers during today's webinar. But if you have questions during the presentation, please email your questions to Seismic Compliance Unit at hcai.ca.gov. If the presentation experiences transmission difficulties, please log out and log back in using the same login information that was sent to you by Teams when you registered for the presentation, and we will do the same if we are experiencing transmission difficulties on our side. Today's presenter is Ollie Sumer, Supervisor for the Seismic Compliance Unit here at HCAI. Once again, thank you for joining us today, and without further ado, I hand the presentation over to Ollie.
Thanks, Kelly. So do you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Today I will talk about the upcoming January 1st, 2024 deadline. And we have about 1 hour to go over all the requirements. So there's a lot to cover, so I'm gonna just go ahead and start. So on the first slide, what I wanted to do is basically spell everything out, what you're gonna see in this presentation, and what is due in about 6 weeks. So I will quickly go over these items in the beginning, and then presentation will go over maybe 5 minutes each to explain what is required. Two categories. One is NPC related. The other one is AB 1882 related submissions. Let's start with NPC. If your building is NPC 2, and if it's a general acute care building, and if you are located in a very high seismic zone, seismic design category F, the NPC 3 compliance date is due by the end of this year. So we are looking for construction final document by the end of this year. If you are planning to upgrade the GAC building to NPC 4D, then that's again due by the end of this year. It needs to include operational plan by the end of this year. Operational plan is part of the evaluation report. If you are not pursuing 4D, but if you are pursuing 4, again, the evaluation report is due by the end of this year. For all general acute care buildings, NPC 5 is due by the end of this year. So that includes 72-hour fuel evaluation and water rationing plan. Again, this is for all GAC buildings. If you are planning to not continue general acute care services by the end after 2030, then we'd like to get a letter of intent from the facility, basically stating that this particular building is not going to continue, so that we put that building on a different track. Switching to AB 1882, two big things coming. One of them is services reporting application, licensed GAC services reporting application. Again, this is for all buildings. And the signage application, this is again for all GAC buildings. So if you followed everything that I said and you are already there, then you can just relax, sit back. There's not much that you're gonna learn for the rest of the presentation. But if you are in the process of doing these things, hopefully this presentation will help you. All right, let's start with definitions and resources. everything that I'm going to explain actually was explained in details in previous webinars. So I want to point out 3 of them especially. One of them is the very comprehensive step-by-step webinar for all NPCs and AB 1882. So this is a 3-hour-long webinar. Please check our website to go over that. The slides are available. The video is available. There was a specific AB 1882 webinar. Detailed step-by-step applications and everything was included in that one. And then there was a great NPC 5 webinar. So again, that goes through the user guide, instructions, examples. So please check those things out. Again, if you have any questions, let us know. Now, again, going through the background, all of these studies really focus on the hospital functionality. There are 3 things that makes a hospital function. One is structural, beams, columns, shear walls, slabs, foundations, and we have structural performance category for that. So SPC ratings. Non-structural, the NPC that we are talking about, that's cladding, partitions, ceilings, equipment, pipes, furnishing, contents, elevators, stairs. So all of those things, we want to make sure that they are braced or considered for hospital functionality. And of course, the staff is is the most important part of the hospital functionality. So all those 3 things have to come together for hospital to provide services after a disaster. This webinar does not quite get into any SPC discussion because the SPC has an ultimate deadline, 2030 deadline. It doesn't have a 1/1/2024 deadline. But as you can imagine, when you are working on NPC, you should also consider what the future plan for SPC for those general acute care buildings. So just to, again, give an overall view, SPC 1 is the worst, 5 is the best. 1 is significant risk of collapse, and these are our bad buildings. And from SPC 3 to 5, these are what we call compliant or conforming buildings. So these 4 ratings are allowed to serve general acute care services beyond 2030 for structural side of things. Anything below, they are not. So SPC 2 is between SPC 1 and the conforming. So SPC 2s are, in a nutshell, pretty much SPC 1 buildings with an extension to 2030. So they have varying degrees of risk, but the idea is to basically resolve, upgrade, remove by 2030. NPC, what those mean, again, NPC 1 is the worst, NPC 5 is the best. NPC 1 and 2 are really pose significant risk to life in a major earthquake. NPC 5, on the other hand, is reasonably capable of providing services to the public after a major earthquake. Now, if we look at in between 3, 4D, and 4, so those do require some anchorage to equipment and distribution systems, but they are not, for example, addressing water, wastewater, emergency fuel. So just having this one, we categorize these rating as equipment and systems critical to patient care may not function in a major earthquake. So to dive a little deeper into that, let's say this is your building. Just an example, simplified building, which you have admin services, ICU, med-surg beds, radiology, and on the first floor, some CUP equipment such as emergency generator, chiller, and of course, your stairs and elevators. So everything is tied with utilities coming from outside or from another building with electric, gas, water, and bulk oxygen. So as you know, the hospital buildings are a maze of utilities connected to each other. So in a state where the building is not evaluated or the building is not braced, it is by default an MPC1 state. So in this state, let's say the bulk oxygen is anchored, the emergency generator is anchored, the fire alarm panel is anchored, the exit way, the lighting, those are anchored, and the communication system, and a little few more things that gets you to MPC2. So again, MPC2 really focuses on the evacuation of a building, not really functioning of a building. So again, as you see, it's a minimal amount of things that we look at for the building for MPC2. MPC3 focuses on certain areas, including critical care areas. In this example, it's an ICU and radiology. MPC3 focuses on anchoring the equipment and the utilities that is within that boundary. So it doesn't look at bracing outside of the boundary. So you may say, well, in an earthquake, what if this line gets damaged? How come the ICU function? The answer is MPC3 only addresses the equipment here to make sure that the equipment and systems remain in place, do not fall on patients during an earthquake. It doesn't really focus too much on the function of the space. On the other hand, MPC4D, starting with level 1, it looks at these spaces and it asks the question, what is the operational plan of this building, by looking at what is not braced and what alternative ways to provide these services. MPC4 is more holistic approach, so it looks at everywhere in the building and braces equipment and the distribution system. There is no operational plan attached to MPC4 because the assumption is the building will be code compliant. MPC5 is only given when the building is either MPC4D or 4, and water tank, fuel tank, and sewer tank are evaluated for 72-hour operation. So that's in a nutshell of all the ratings. So as of 2 weeks ago, this is where we are on the SPC ratings and NPC ratings. So we have about 42 SPC1 buildings and close to 700 SPC2 buildings, and the rest is compliant buildings. On the NPC side, we have 2 facilities that has MPC1 rating. Actually, one of them is almost done, so we are pretty much down to 1 facility. When it comes to MPC2, there's a good amount of MPC2 buildings, and there's 3R, 3, little 4D starting, MPC4, and MPC5, which is growing rapidly. The 2030 compliant means that this SPC rating, 3, 4D, 4, and 5, and NPC5 is a 2030 seismic compliant. So that is the goal. Now, looking at the goal, it's very important to find out the current information about each of these facilities. We update our website very frequently, and we add more information as new laws come in, and we try to update as much as we can. The best place to go is on our website. Go to facility detail and put your facility name and look at these tabs: facility info, building list, so on and so forth. So these tabs will give you a whole lot more information about seismic compliance. So if you do this and click on building list, oh, sorry, first site plan, yeah, before I go there. The site plan shows you your building names and building numbers. So these buildings are on our system what we see. So if you see any discrepancy on the site plan, please email Seismic Compliance Unit with the correction. You can just handwrite it, mark it, and we will correct it. On the building list seismic information, you're going to see a table. So this table gets updated every 2 weeks. And depending on what's in front of us in terms of new laws, we add new columns, update columns. So I want to just go through quickly on a couple columns. OSHPAD 1 versus OSHPAD 2, 3, 4, 5 categories. Only OSHPAD 1 has SPC and NPC rating. So if you have any other designation, including 1R, there's no SPC or NPC rating. Removal of acute care services date. So this is if you have an SPC 2 building, we put this date saying that, hey, this needs to be resolved by 2030 SPC way. The NPC, it has 2 different dates. One is 2030 if you are seismic design category D, and 1/1/2024 if you are seismic design category F. And we put an asterisk to make sure that we explain all the intermediate deadlines, 2024, 2026, 2028, and 2030, so that there's no misunderstanding about what that NPC date is. This building code is important because as your building gets different code cycles, the amount of evaluation or the scope of evaluation changes. AB 1882 signage, if you submitted a signage and it gets installed, now it's going to start showing that it's compliant. What else is on our website? There's a new tab called Building Services. Again, this is coming from AB 1882 requirement. So once you submit and once it gets reviewed and approved, a table will pop up under your facility information. So it simply shows the pre-select or pre-filled out services and what was approved for each building. One more thing new is the building operational plan. If your building, if one of the GAC building in your facility got a NPC 4D approval, then your operational plan will show up and ready to download on the website. So as more 4Ds gets approved, then we will keep putting those operational plans on our website. So this is a continuous update on our side. Another resource that I recommend to look at is our seismic compliance and safety webpage. So what we reviewed in the previous pages was facility detail. Now I'm switching to seismic compliance and safety. There's tremendous amount of information under this page. And recently, actually, Kelly did a great job to reorganize it for a better user interface. So now we have boxes to take you to categories of information under seismic compliance. So when I just zoom in on those boxes, since in the next several weeks, you're going to be putting a lot of new seismic compliance projects, please check this out. It shows you step-by-step application process and frequently asked questions. There's other frequently asked questions, what ratings mean, what the laws are, and also additional resources. If you want to check out the code sections, actually it has a direct code links and many more. So please take advantage of this web page. And before I move on to other requirements, I want to point out one thing, because I get this question a lot about the OSHPD building types. So let me put all of them at once. If your general acute care building was constructed before 1973, and it's code before 1973, it is what we call local jurisdiction built or pre-OSA built non-conforming buildings. So as a general rule, the older the building, the more things that we look at on evaluation. The newer the building, the less things that we look at in a building. So this is the older category. And then between 73 and approximately 82, these are OSA permitted buildings. So if your drawings show H number and 4-digit number on a permit, these are OSA buildings. Between 1982 and 1996, these are OSHPD permitted buildings. Again, as you get closer, the number of things that you need to do on evaluation gets very, very small. So these are generally fire sprinkler limited evaluation only buildings. And then 1996 to today, these are OSHPD permit, so they generally get an automatic SPC5 and PC4, or even if it is newer, it's SPC5 and PC5. So please, on the facility detail, take a look at what era that your building is falling under, so that you kind of start estimating what the scope is. Diving to MPC deadlines. Again, nothing has changed. By January 2024, complete non-structural evaluation for each general acute care building up to MPC 4, 4D, and 5. By 2026, the construction documents needs to be submitted to the office. What does that mean? What construction documents? The evaluation basically looks at what is deficient in the building, what needs to be fixed, or what is the delta that is needed to get you to MPC 4, 4D, or 5. So these construction documents are basically look at those deficiencies, and if it is a bracing, then it's a bracing detail that we'll put together and submit it to the region. So these are the actual construction permit documents that tries to fix what the findings are. So this is again submittal date. 2028 is the date to finally get a permit. So it kind of gives about 2 years of window to have a submit, get the back checks, and get maybe relook at the scope, fine-tune scope. So you can really change or really focus on what's needed. If there's a big change in the scope during this period, then please submit a revised evaluation report to seismic compliance unit with the revised scope, because we want to make sure that what was initially evaluated does not change significantly down the road. And if it does, let's match it back so that at the end of the day, the scope as well as the construction is in line and synchronized. And the ultimate goal is to finish the construction by 2030. Now, going into the details of the MPC deadlines. As I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, if your building is in high seismic area, seismic design category D, your ultimate MPC deadline, MPC 5 deadline, is January 1st, 2030. If your building is in very high seismic area, seismic design category F, then the compliance to NPC 3 is 2024, And once you have that compliance, then the rest of the MPC 4, 4D, and 5 is just like other buildings, so it follows the same pattern. So we have 52 MPC2 buildings at the moment to meet the at the end of year deadline. So a lot of other buildings already met. Okay. What about the buildings that will no longer provide acute care services beyond 2030? So again, this question comes up very frequently. Obviously, as a facility, they don't want to put resources to do all these evaluations if they know that that's not going to continue beyond 2030. Then there's a process for that. By end of this year, basically, please update your seismic compliance plan, and please submit an application to seismic compliance unit with a letter of intent stating that the building, the building in question, will remove their GAC services by 2030. If we get that letter of intent, we will open a project. We will put that letter under that project, and we will now track that building on a different path. So the path is now, rather than upgrading the building, the path is now removing the general acute care services. So how can we get there? Again, the similar deadlines kind of pop up. Again, the ultimate goal is 2030. Now, if you start stepping back by 2028, we really need to have a project to make that happen. And if you come back 2 years, we are expecting a RACS construction project submittal by 1/1/2026, so that we move forward with the RACS in a timely manner. Touching on MPC 4D, so unlike other topics, I put a bit more slides on MPC 4D because again, this is somewhat relatively new rating that facilities have questions. So MPC 4D is basically a building that meets the MPC 3 criteria for bracing and anchorage, and there's an operational plan. Now, there are 3 levels: MPC 4D level 1, level 2, level 3. So level 1 is the least amount of bracing. Level 2 is a bit more. Level 3 is more. All of them require operational plan. And the operational plan, again, is required by 1/1/2024. And people say, why do we need the operational plan by the end of this year? The reason is operational plan really lays out what the final operation of this building after all the work is done. Now, if the facility chooses to brace certain areas but not other areas, so that they can make statements about their operational plan accordingly. So operational plan is really key on determining the scope of the 4D. So therefore it is required. It's part of the evaluation. Doesn't matter level 1, 2, or 3. The big takeaway on operational plan versus level is operational plan gets more detailed on level 1 and a bit less detailed on 2 and a whole lot less detail on level 3. And there's no operational plan for MPC 4. So as a rule of thumb, less bracing requires more operational plan. More bracing takes away the considerations of operational plan. So that's kind of the trade-off between the document versus bracing. Level 1, again, as I showed a little bit on different graphics, is the minimum requirement. Level 2 and 3 are optional. And again, the critical care area bracing at the your building, and the source is required on MPC 3. Level 2 is basically first you need to be compliant with level 1 items, plus the utilities from the critical care area to the source needs to be braced. So the bracing is not just within your building in question, it goes all the way to the source. If it goes to another building, you just follow it all the way through to that building. So level 2 gives a little more leeway on the considerations on operational plan, such as if this line is braced and the critical care area is taken care of with this, then we are not expecting the required statements on the operational plan for critical care areas. So that makes the operational plan a whole lot easier to prepare. Still, there are statements that needs to be made for the rest of the building. But since those are not critical care areas, the finding solutions to the rest of the area is easier. Again, level 2 requires operational plan by 1/1/2024. Level 3 is basically level 2 with more areas that the hospital chooses to remain functional after an earthquake. Operational plan is an owner-approved plan. Again, it provides an alternative manner to provide these services. I'll just skip these. So the operational plan document will be published on our website. So this is one question that, again, we get quite frequently. They say, okay, can we submit it after 1/1/2024? Again, the answer is operational plan is required before 1/1/2024 because that's part of the evaluation. Now, can you change it later? Yes, you can. As you fine-tune your bracing or operations or other decisions, you can change it later. When you change it, please submit a revision to the approved evaluation so that we have it on file, we know what the plan is, what the scope is. MPC 4. So similar to other MPCs, the evaluation deadline is 1/1/2024. It basically requires bracing and evaluating all architectural equipment per Table 11.1 in California Administrative Code. If you use exceptions under MPC 3 areas, those exceptions don't apply in MPC 4. If, and this is very common, if there was an OSHPD project in the MPC 4 building, you can take credit of that. So just think of like a map, and there are a bunch of areas in this map that was upgraded throughout the life of this building. It can be a TI project. It can be bringing a new service or replacing a service. So whatever the reason is, a lot of these rooms were touched using an OSHPD project. Sometimes it's minor, sometimes it's major, but anything that was done under OSHPD project, you can take credit of that. You do not have to re-evaluate the same equipment for code force compliance. It's basically, if you, for example, if you see an area, let's say it says 3-story building, the second story was completely floor to floor, got upgraded. On the MPC 4 evaluation, all we need to see for that second floor is mark that area saying that from floor to floor, everything under here was upgraded under this OSHPD project number. Then that second floor is done. Then you look at first and third floor about what is what is left to be evaluated, and what Ashbot project was then. So it requires a good amount of document search and identifying what was done before. If you are just starting to do MPC4 evaluation, I recommend to start with what you have in terms of the documents that you have on facilities archive. Give us that evaluation, and after the deadline, as you find more documents, you can always go back and fine tune and reduce the scope of retrofit as you find things. But please, when you find a document or get it from our archives, please send a revised application or revised evaluation report. MPC4 does not require operational plan. And I touched on this one, but let me touch the same question a little differently. Let's say you submitted an MPC4 evaluation, and later the facility or the design professional, for whatever reason, they want to change the target MPC rating. So from 4 to, let's say, 4D. Can you do that? The answer is yes, you can change your MPC rating or the MPC target rating. Just submit us a revised evaluation. So this is, again, as you learn more about the existing conditions, you may actually choose to go other way. When you find a lot of documents that already took care of these things, maybe you don't need MPC4D, maybe you are already 4. So you can always do the revision after the deadline, but please get your evaluation in before the deadline. MPC5. Again, the compliance target is 2030. The evaluation deadline is 1/1/2024. So what is MPC5 about? Water, wastewater, fuel storage, and utilities and systems anchored and braced, which means that your building needs to be 4 or 4D. We have a great guide to help you to prepare water rationing plan. So please go to our website and look for this document. Again, this is a living document. As we get more data, we try to improve as much as we can and we see. The latest update, there are 2 versions. One was published a while ago, and the latest update was August 2023. So again, with the update, we are not bringing in any new requirement. We are just adding frequently asked questions. We also put a CDPH internal checklist. We put some considerations for industrial water for temperature control, and we added summary tables, a minor editorial. So if you haven't seen it, please use August 2023 version. So again, similar to what I mentioned about 4 and 4D, let's say you did your MPC5 evaluation and you found out that the facility needs, let's say on the water side, a 20,000 gallon tank. So the demand versus capacity, the difference was 20,000. We do not need to know where that 20,000 gallon will go in the evaluation. You do not have to show us where it's exactly located, the details of those drawings. No, the evaluation basically focuses on what is missing. So let's say it's 20,000 gallon was the identified evaluation. And 6 months later, you looked at the buildings, you did some more analysis, you have more time, Then you sharpen your pencil, and basically, while preparing the construction drawings, you found out that, okay, we don't need 20,000. We really need only 10,000 gallons. At that point, please revise your MPC5 evaluation, submit it to Seismic Compliance Unit for concurrence. And when that happens, then you can move forward with the construction documents to the region. And let's say, again, hypothetically, during that review process, you found out that, you know what, maybe 10,000 gallon is too much. I can further sharpen my pencil to 5,000 gallons. Then again, during that process, if that is the case, submit a revised MPC5 evaluation to Seismic Compliance Unit for concurrence, then you can move forward. The reason for updating this one is at the end of the day, the MPC5 rating is to match on the evaluation versus what is on the ground. So we will always go back to the evaluation and look at the as-is state of the building to give you MPC5. So therefore, it's important to keep Seismic Compliance Unit in the loop early for these changes. One other thing about MPC5 application, is it building by building? Is this a campus wide? Do I need, if I have 20 buildings, do I have to have 20 different reports for the facility? So this kind of lays out the a practical way to approach MPC5. So MPC5 is a building by building rating. It's not a just campus wide rating. So each building needs to have its own MPC5 application. Now, you may say that, well, that may not be practical because you are only preparing one report for the whole campus. So the way to tackle that one is you prepare the report for the whole campus, touching all buildings, including non-water buildings, such as canopies, I don't know, generator sheds, or so every building, every GAC building on our site plan. Please include that. And in the application email, just note that please open MPC5 project for the following list of buildings. Let's say you have 20 buildings. Seismic Compliance Unit will open 20 applications for you and copy that one report under 20 applications. Well, you may say, well, that's kind of unnecessary. Well, here's the thing. During this life of review and upgrading to MPC5, there are a lot of times that some buildings end up getting upgraded. Some buildings take a different path. So each building, we want to make sure that it has 72 hours or 24 hours with exception route to get to MPC5. If some buildings can't, then those will remain MPC4, and maybe it needs construction or another action. So things may start getting fragmented down the road. So therefore, we track each building separately to make sure that every building gets to MPC5. So therefore, we have one application for each building, but we don't want to make it very impractical in the application process. So just send us one report, we will copy it, and we will go from there. Switching to AB 1882, we have about 15 minutes left. So AB 1882 has 5 aspects to it. So I'm going to touch on number 4 and number 5. The first one is about reporting services. The other one is about signage. Everything about 1882 is spelled out in our PIN publication, PIN 75. So you can look at all the details. Even frequently asked questions were included in PIN 75. I also put the link to download the the PIN 75. Again, it had a revision to include frequent asked questions on the May 30th version, so please use that. And the first item that, again, due by the end of this year is the services reporting. The services, the general acute care license for this facility, spells out, what services are in the campus. And if you look at our building list, you're gonna see OSHPD 1, OSHPD 2, maybe OSHPD 5 buildings. So the information that we don't know is what services are in each of those BLD numbered boundaries. So there's an information about overall, but there's no specific information about each GAC building. So this reporting basically spells out which service is in which seismically separate building. Again, the idea is to see what rating of SPC and NPC corresponds to what services. Application process, we have an ESP user guide. So it's unlike the other seismic compliance unit applications. This is our from Citizen Access, the website route. So you need your PIN to submit the application. If you want to know step-by-step process for this application, please go to our ESP user guide on our website. It's section 25. It really walks you through every step of the way, menus, what it looks like, what to click. So it's very detailed. It's there. And I also put a link for you to download if you have trouble navigating our website. Once you put the project number in, you're gonna see a project number something like formatted like this: GACSERV, services. So you're gonna see a year because these services are supposed to or required to be reported every year. So next year, same time around November, we will open the portal again, and these will be GAC Serve-2024, and then the project number. So this services thing is a yearly deal. Now, the services reporting is not just HCI. So we are one of the 9 entities that is supposed to receive this report. The difference of us is we are the first one who will get these. We will then package it, put it in a nice format, and put it on our website for you to download and submit it to all other 8 entities. You don't have to wait for our published data to go to the other entities, but we want to make sure that there's no not matching information between all these entities. So to bring some uniformity, we'd like you to submit to us first, and then let us look at the services and make corrections if necessary. And we will publish a PDF for each facility on our website after or before January 1st, 2024, so that you will have time to take that PDF and contact with these other entities. We are not sending the report to any of the other entities, so that is facilities' responsibility to do that. The other requirement is signage. The law requires to post the SPC and NPC rating and certain explanation on any general acute care building that is not 2030 compliant today. So any lobby or waiting area is something that we try to explain in Pin 75 as well as on our previous webinars. So there are details and some considerations because some buildings don't have lobby or waiting area. So what to do with that? So we have some thorough examples regarding those cases. So if, again, in a nutshell, if there's no lobby or waiting area, we basically look at, if there's an appropriate place to put the posting location. This is what the signage looks like. So you're going to start seeing this pretty much everywhere across California for all GAC buildings. We have a QR code that takes the public to a web page that we have that tries to give more information about what these ratings are. Now, with the signage, we also have a user guide. Again, it takes you step-by-step process, and one application per building. Again, there's no application fee. There's no permit. So it's a pretty straightforward process. The big idea, the big process is once you submit a floor plan and the signage with the signage location in and the appropriate signage attached to it, we review it. If we accept it, it directly kicks it to the field staff for verification. So you do not need design professional, you do not need IOR, you do not need permit. So it's a very, again, straightforward process. The project number examples are GAC. Instead of serve, it's a sign, again, with the year and the project number. This is one quick example. If you have, let's say, 4 buildings in your campus, we'd like to see each building with the appropriate signage. It may get one, it may get multiple signage depending on the waiting areas, lobbies. Sometimes it goes to corridors. We are not trying to put the signage on every single lobby or waiting area. We are trying to reduce it down to a more reasonable level. We try to choose mostly heavy traffic areas or at the elevator lobbies. If you have multi-story building, we'd like at least one signage at each floor, and depending on the size of the building, each floor may get more than one signage. I want to touch on some of the one frequent asked question. Please take a look at Pin 75 for all other frequent asked questions, but AB 1882 posting is not required for equipment yards, tunnels, canopies, cooling towers, or emergency generator enclosures. When it comes to central utility plants, CUPs, it's case-by-case basis. The rest is typically we do require. The material, it doesn't have to be plastic or it can be paper. There's no ADA requirement for the informational signage, so no braille. And this kind of gets me to the final slide where this was my first slide as well. Again, to touch all of these items, if you haven't started, please contact with us. Please let us know what your status is. Let us look at what's in our system. We will try to help you as much as we can with the documents that we have. There are a lot of facilities with some new management, and maybe those people are not aware. So if you see this webinar, And if you have questions, please let us know. We'll try to answer it as much as we can. So we, again, next year and the following year, all these evaluations will now go to the next phase. And we will have more webinars coming up early next year to touch on some of the construction best practices for MPC, as well as we're gonna have a webinar about SPC and the SPC upgrades as a refresher, as well as some examples that we have. We're gonna also later in the year, we're gonna also touch on 1R building. Well, if you don't want to upgrade, what are the processes to touch on those items? So again, if you have any questions, please contact with us. Just as a quick reminder on the people who are working on this seismic compliance unit, a big thanks to all the seismic compliance unit engineers, staff. So they are doing really great job. They are doing a lot of good communication. Just a couple pointers. Carl Sherman will be taking care of the services application. So he's the main contact. So if you have questions about services on AB 1882, you can contact with him. For signage application, the direct contact would be Patrick Rogers. For MPC 5 evaluation, I recommend to talk to Kamal Preet, Kalsi. For MPC 4D, Patrick, myself, or Alireza. And for application issues, we have Constance website, and all other application issues. Kelly is also available, and many others. So again, we are here to get the facilities to the finish line. So thank you so much, and happy Thanksgiving, early happy Thanksgiving. Thank you. Kelly?
Thank you, everybody. So this is going to bring us to the end of our presentation. We hope you found this webinar to be helpful. Please remember, if you didn't download the PDF handout, you should be able to find it in the chat. And if you have any questions, please email the Seismic Compliance Unit at hcai.ca.gov, and I'll put that link as well in the chat. It's been a pleasure being with you all today, and thank you for doing your part in providing access to safe, quality healthcare environments throughout the state of California. Thank you.